Hello, I'm Miss Gray, and this time on my video, I'm going to show you how to rename fractions as decimals and decimals as fractions. And what we're going to use is we're going to use a base 10 grid. So if you can see close up on the grid, the first grid is broken into 10 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The second grid is broken into 100 parts. 10 going across, 10 going down. And we know that 10 times 10 equals 100. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shade in an area on my 10 equal parts, my base 10 grid. Okay, I've shaded in 1 part green out of 10 equal parts. So if I wrote that as a fraction, my numerator would be 1 and my denominator would be 10 because there are 10 equal parts. If I wanted to write it as a decimal, I would write it 1/10 as a decimal. It would be written as, always put my decimal point first, and 1/10. Now you're probably wondering, like, how is that saying that that's 1/10 as a decimal? Well, I'll show you using my place value chart. Now, if we're talking about 1/10, that means that 1 is in the tens place. And then there's the decimal point in front. So, this time around, you have it as the decimal point and the 1 in the tens place. So that's why it is known as 1/10, or 1 shaded part out of 10 equal parts. Now, if I wanted to shade in another part on here, that is 1 part shaded out of 100 equal parts. So now if I had to write that as a fraction, my fraction would be, my numerator is 1 and my denominator would be 100, as you can see. So now if I want to write that as a decimal, I would use my decimal place value mat. Let me work down to the next spot. Now because it's 1 out of 100, my 1 is no longer in the tens place. My 1 is in the hundreds place. So I put my 1 in the hundreds place. I still have my decimal point right here. Because this is an empty spot, I always put my placeholder in, and my placeholder is always going to be the number 0. So now if you look at it, 1 out of 100 or 100ths is written as decimal point, 0, and then 1. Okay, so now if you notice, it's not, this part does not equal the same thing as that part. This is out of 100 equal parts. And basically, when you break things down into hundreds, it gets smaller and smaller. The next thing I want to show you is how to use those decimals and fractions and look at them to make them equivalent. So, here's my whole. My whole is this large square. And we have, once again, 1 out of 10 equal parts that are shaded in, or 1/10. If you look closely at this one, now we have, once again, we have the 10 equal parts, and then we have 2 of them shaded in. So therefore, it's 2/10, 2 parts out of 10 equal parts. So then it asks me, how many tenths are there? So how many tenths does that mean? There are 2 shaded in. So I write the number 2. So now we have 2 out of 10. If I want to write it as a decimal, of course, I would have the 2 in the tens place because they're 2/10. Moving on to this next one, 1/2 of this square is shaded in. But how many tenths is that actually? It's not 2 of those tenths shaded in. Let's count how many there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5/10 that are shaded in. Now, 1/2 is the same thing as saying 5 out of those 10 equal parts that are shaded in. And if I wrote 5/10 as a decimal, we would have the 0, then a decimal point, and then the 5. So now it's basically saying that 1/2 is the same thing as 5/10. If you notice, it's broken in equal parts. Here's 1/2, and there's the other half that's visible. Now, we're no longer breaking it down into 10 equal parts. Now we have this, the fraction of 1/5. It means 1 part out of 5 equal parts. So now, if you look at it, here's 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, 5/5. And one of those fifths is shaded in. So how many tenths? It's asking me tenths, not fifths. It's asking me how many tenths there are. Now, if you look closely, you'll see the tenths in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there are 2 tenths that are shaded in. So I'll write the number 2. Then 1/5 is the same thing as saying how many tenths are there shaded. There are 2. And then, of course, writing as a decimal, we have the decimal point and the 0, the decimal point, and then the 2. Okay, the next thing, we have 2/5, 2 out of the 5 equal groups that are shaded in. Once again, let's look at the 5 equal parts. Here's 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, 5/5. But the question is how many tenths? And you can see the tenths again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And how many tenths are shaded in? Let's count how many are shaded in. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now, okay, then 2/5 equals 4 tenths. So now, these two have the same equal parts. 2 out of the 5 equal parts is the same thing as 4 out of the 10 equal parts. So that means that 2/5 and 4 tenths are equivalent. So an equivalent means, we all know that equivalent means that fractions that are the same size will share the same fractional parts. So now if we write it as a decimal, we know that we have to put the 4 right here in this spot. So now this is a pattern that we're starting to see. 3 out of 5 equal parts. How many tenths is that? Well, let's go back. If 1 out of 5 equal parts is 2 tenths, 2 out of 5 equal parts is 4 tenths, then 3 out of 5 equal parts must be 6 tenths because you're counting the numerator by ones, but you're also counting by 2. So this would be 6. And then, of course, put in my decimal point and then the 6. And then 4/5 we know is 2, 4, 6, and then 4/5 would be 8 tenths. And then I put my 8 tenths. Now, here we go back again. Now, this large square is broken up into 100 equal parts. We know that one piece is 1 out of 100 or 1/100th. Okay? So now let's go to this. 1/4 is shaded in. Well, it doesn't look like 1/4, but when you break this down, this large square into 4 equal parts, 1/4 is shaded in. And then, how many hundredths pieces is that? Well, I can sit here and count, but I don't really have to count. I know that that is 25, and I'm going to tell you how I know that's 25. Well, if I want to think of 100 as 1 whole or $1, if I broke that 1 whole or $1 into 4 equal parts, I know that each part would be 25 cents. So that's the same thing as 25 over 100. So now a 25 hundredths. So how do I write it as a decimal? I will write it in as 25 hundredths. 0 and 25 hundredths. So now when you think about it, 1 out of 4 equal parts is 25 hundredths. They are equivalent. 1/4 is equivalent to 25 hundredths. Same thing as saying 1/4 out of 4 quarters is 25 cents. Next part. 3/4 is shaded in. That is true. And 3/4 is the same thing as saying how many hundredths. Well, if you know that 1/4 is 25 hundredths, 3/4 without even counting all that it is 75 hundredths. Or you could say 3/4 out of 4 quarters is 75 cents. So it's 75 hundredths. And then as I write it with the decimal, is 0, decimal point, and 75 hundredths. Now, if I wanted to use my place value sheet, if I wanted to record my hundreds, I would say for 25 hundredths, here's my decimal point, and then the 2 is in the tenths place, and the 5 is in the hundredths place. And I read it all together. I don't say 2 tenths and 5 hundredths. I read the number as one, 25 hundredths, because the 5 is in the hundredths place. If I wanted to read it as 75 hundredths, I have my decimal point, and 75. The 7 is in the tenths place, the 5 is in the hundredths. I don't read it as 7 tenths and 5 hundredths. I read it all together as one number, 75 hundredths. So now, I hope that you're able now to rename fractions after watching this video. Thank you.